Hi Gordon.
Oh yeah, how you doing?
How are you? Welcome to Northampton. You think about the motor racing history in this area, how many World Drivers' Championships, how many Grand Prix, how many Indy 500s were won by engines that were built, designed.
No, it's an absolute piece of history here at Cosworth, yeah. And now, of course, the world's greatest road car engine as well. So I feel like I've come full circle from my first Grand Prix win with a Cosworth T.50 back in 1974, and now standing in front of this thing of beauty. Now,
was that one of the reasons you decided to go with Cosworth? What was the thinking behind that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, the sort of figures I had in mind for the world's highest revving, fastest revving, lightest engine, I think there's only, honestly, one company on the planet that can do that, and that's right here.
And when you came to Cosworth with those numbers, what was that conversation like? We should probably get Bruce involved in this at some point.
Yeah, we'll speak to Bruce, but yeah, I think there was a bit of a silence after I mentioned the revs in particular and the engine weight, but I mean, they've delivered. And in fact, when you look at the detail on this thing, I think they've actually delivered more than I ever expected. Because, you know, I grew up on engines before I switched to chassis, so I'm an engine guy. And when I look at the detail on this, it's just, I mean, I could look at this all day.
It's beautiful. All day. Let's talk about some of the details. What are we seeing here?
Well, the first thing is this crankshaft is actually a masterpiece. It's the lightest sort of V12, well, 4-litre V12 crank ever made. But it's not just light, it's very, very low inertia, because unlike an 8 where you need much bigger balance weights and bob weights on the crank, this is pretty much perfect primary balance. It's 65 degree V, included angle. So the crank itself is, all this stuff is really, really skinny, small as you can get. And I think Bruce himself said this crankshaft is the pinnacle of all the design, going right back through everything they've ever done.
It's pretty punchy.
It's just, I mean, that's 13 kilos for a 4-litre crankshaft, which is mind-boggling for me, really.
And the forces going through that must be incredible.
Yeah, the torsionals going through it, so you have to take all that into account as well. But it goes beyond that. I mean, it's just, if you look at the size of the big end bolts and these wasted studs, they've even got a little O-ring. Bruce was explaining to me earlier, they've got a little O-ring here because he could see these cars in lovely garages with white floors and so, and that's to stop the oil getting past here and possibly getting through these threads and dripping off the nut.
So, I love the attention to detail.
But I mean, just look how slender these little studs are. You know, when I was growing up with engines, those were really butch. Even on a little 4-cylinder, those were really butch, big studs. So
does that go back to what you said right at the beginning of T50 with the simulation tools now and how much you can shape?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, the computing tools people have now, but it's, you know, it's more than that. It's more than that. You still have to have the inbuilt background knowledge and experience with designing all these engines, you know, to get to something like this, which is the absolute pinnacle in road engine design. I said at the time, just can't see anybody surpassing a V12 in this day and age when we're all switching over to electrics and hybrids and things. I think this will probably, it's got a good chance it'll remain the best V12 ever.
It's funny having gone through that, seeing the engines built here for the first time and everything, but actually having driven it quite a lot now, just how very, very, very good it is.
It's not just, I mean, it's the complete, for me, it's a complete engine. It's not just the fact it's a beautiful design, it produces the power and the torque, it's the way it drives too. I mean, that's the clever bit. It's
that's the bit that's so important, isn't it? Without the other stuff, it's immaterial.
And these are all hand assembled by one person. Bruce, I think, said it took about 140 hours to assemble each engine. So there's one person that assembles this, and well, the final assembly anyway does that. So we're going to put a little nameplate on the engine, signed by the person that's assembled the engine. And then when these engines get to Shelford or Dunsfold, we'll line them up with customer numbering.
So each engine is bespoke for a chassis. Yeah. It's interesting talking to the engine builders here and the ownership they take and the pride they take in this.
Well, I mean, I'd love to. What a job! I'd love to work on these. As I said earlier, I'm an engine guy. I've built lots and lots of engines in my time and tuned a lot, way back from 1966. And I mean, this is just such a beautiful thing to work on.
So this is your dream?
Absolutely, it's dream come true and more.
Well, that says a lot. Should we go into the next stage of build? So we've got the next stage of build.
Yep, heads are on now, and more things of beauty.
I was going to say, but so delicate.
Yeah, I love this bit because the way the cams drive the valves. I mean, all this clever stuff is because this revs to 12,000 revs. You know, if you rev to 9, 5, 10, you don't need to go to so much trouble. These tiny little fingers that the cam lobes drive.
Which have got GMA written on them.
Which have GMA on them, yes. Very, very low inertia and lightweight. And of course with a V12, because you've got the 6 cylinders on each bank, the cams are quite long. And there's a massive load when these lobes come around, because these are very aggressive for the power, of course. When they come around and try to compress the valves, you've got a lot of torsion in the camshaft. And because you want these lobes to be acting the same way as the lobes up here, you don't want the camshaft to twist. So that's why this is a really big diameter. And to keep it light, it's gun drilled. So you've got a very thin tubular shaft. And then a great Cosworth invention is that to further dampen this down so you don't get any nasty torsional vibrations, they have these hydraulic dampers on the end of the cams. Cosworth have been fantastic over the years in coming up with first to solve high revving problems, if you like, in engines. So these are a little hydraulic unit which is electron beam welded together, and that helps dampen out the cams too, so the cams stay accurate from there all the way to there.
And does that go back to the DFV?
I think certainly the gear cush drive, which we'll look at in a minute, goes back to the DFV. We'll ask Bruce, see how far back that goes. The other thing I love about racing-inspired engines is the fact you look down the inlet ports here and the valves are right there.
Really right there?
Straight down, they're right there.
And they're minuscule.
They're tiny, yeah. This is another first for a road car. All the other twin cams, up until now, the valves have been in what we call in-car line or in-engine line, so they're straight. So you have the exhaust valves, you have the inlet valves and exhaust valves, but they're straight. These valves are inclined out at a slight angle, so they're radial. Yep. So the cam, the machining on the cam drive here has to be done all at an angle, and that's so with such a small bore, you can make the most of getting the mixture in with the valves already sort of pointing inward.
The accuracy must.
I know. That's for me. That's mind-boggling. That's a first on a big road car engine like this.
If you could have had that technology in South Africa back in the 60s, they wouldn't have seen you coming.
Yeah. So it's full of the whole engine is just full of innovation. Really, it's mind-boggling. Plus, it's a thing of beauty. You know?
It really is. That shot from the front, and you see that V. It's just so
clear. There's Cosworth innovation. You know, with the drive. Once you get above, the cheap and cheerful way of doing a V12 is don't rev above 9.5, because then you can use chain drive, and that's really what if you buy a car for 30, 40 grand twin cam, it'll be either belt drive or chain drive. But once you go up to 12,000, you have to go to gears, and that's racing technology.
Can we go see the gears?
Indeed, but they bring their own problems, but Cosworth has solved those.
I was thinking cost straight away, but
yes. Well, yeah, you can't think costs if you're going to start designing an engine like this.
Let's go see the next stage.
Right.
This bit, it's extra special.
I know, it's like sort of Swiss watch, isn't it?
Yes.
And it has to be that sort of accuracy, because you don't want any backlash on these for any unwanted noise. But once again, this is Cosworth innovation for you, because you get nasty torsionals in this drive up to the cams, and you can break the gears quite easily. Well, in the early days, that's what happened. And Cosworth invented this cush drive here, which uses a very clever little quill shaft between the front gear and the back gear to take the torsionals out, so the gears...
Just a form of damping.
Yeah. Each little... I wouldn't mind one of these gears on my desk, you know, if you look at it.
I'm sure you know a man that can get you one of those.
The attempt to save weight is absolutely everywhere. You know, it's the same approach we've applied to the motor car has been applied to this.
I guess it's because just as hard as it's revved. Because normally you would never see this technology in a road engine, would you?
No, good grief, no. Now, road engines, the cams are all rubber belts, or on the slightly more expensive engines, chains. But I mean, this is obviously hugely expensive. But it's the only way to go, really, for 12,000 revs.
It's pointless being half pregnant. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing that to go all out.
And then here we've got our variable valve timing. So these little units vary the timing on the cam. So a big chunk of that lovely low-down torque you can feel comes from these.
Well, how many times have I said to you, I don't even use first and second gear?
No, the torque delivery, that's every time I drive the car too, I just think, you know, I can't believe you've got an engine that revs to 12, but it actually has such a docile torque curve low down.
Pulls from nothing.
Yep, absolutely. So, yeah, these are hydraulically driven.
Is that a difficult thing to do with the rev limit as well being so high?
It is, yes. Like in Cosworth, the actuators for these are electric, and Cosworth had to develop, Bruce was telling us earlier, Cosworth had to develop their own from scratch because nobody could do one that revved, I think the limit was about 9.5 or something. Right. So they actually had to develop their own actuators. So the 12,000, me walking in and saying I want 12,000 revs caused them all sorts of headaches, but they've actually solved all the problems.
So the next stage in the build is a complete unit. Should we have a wee look at that? So this is like a baking show. Here's one we made earlier. This is the finished product.
Yeah, so this is pretty much it. Yeah, so this is each engine that gets built by the guys goes on the dyno for a few hours and gets a power curve and a sort of certificate that comes with it.
Talk about power curves. We originally said 650 horsepower.
650 was the target, yeah. And we're now about 670. So they've done very well. And the torque curve is just miles better than I ever thought it would be. So we make 70%, maybe 71% of max torque at 2.5. So it's such a tractable engine.
I can definitely say it does that. It's
when you drive it, yeah.
It's unbelievable. But I suppose sub 1,000 kilos, it's not got a lot to push against, does it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's an interesting engine. Things have moved on a lot since we did the McLaren F1 engine with BMW back in the 90s, because that just had 12 throttle bodies, more like a racing engine. And this one, we've got this plenum chamber, and this itself is really trick. And then you just have the 4 throttle bodies. And the main reason for that is if you've got 12 throttle bodies to try and seal and open at exactly the same time, that's virtually impossible to set up. And on a racing car, you don't really mind.
Yep.
But that gives you a little bit of low-speed hunting, and that's really annoying. The McLaren F1, some cars were perfect and some cars would hunt all the time. So this is like a settling chamber. That's one of its jobs. So it settles out all the pulses, and it's got to be very, very stiff to do that. And also, of course, when you shut the throttles, this goes into negative pressure. So this has got to resist all that pressure.
So otherwise it would just suck
them in. And then you've
just
got 4 throttle bodies to control, which is a lot easier to set up. And this is like a settling chamber, if you like. The other reason, which I've just learned today, actually, was the fact that to hide all the pipework that usually goes around this, this is a double wall, so it's twin skinned, and the pipes are all hidden between the 2 skins. I didn't know that, so I've learned that today. So
and then the plenum goes on.
And then the ram induction box goes on top, which gives you the...
Oh, right. And that's where you get that beautiful noise.
The induction noise, yeah. Yeah, we all like that. So this is the finished thing.
And the ISG, which
is... the good old ISG. It's because of this we don't have any rubber belts. So, that was one thing I really love about the engine, right from the beginning, when Cosworth suggested doing an ISG. Right. And it gets rid of all the rubber belts. So from a point of view of being a beautiful engine visually, it's also maintenance. So there's nothing to tighten or adjust. Everything is gear driven. Everything on the engine.
There's no replacing belts every 2 or 3 years. No. Engine out. I've done that.
So maintenance is basically is an oil filter and oil change. That's it. That's your regular maintenance.
So we talk a lot about figures. Your weight of the engine, 178 kilos, for instance, all up. Horsepower. When you drive this engine, what's the emotion? What do you feel?
I always had this. When I thought about doing another supercar, I always had the ultimate V12 in my head. You know, I always tried to imagine what it would sound like, what it would feel like, and what it would look like, funnily enough, because I think the lucky thing for me is the Cosworth designers also love a good-looking piece of equipment, you know, so it's not just the fact it's powerful, it's light. So the figures we set Cosworth to try and achieve, the targets, were really, they are record-breaking, and the weight, the revs, the speed of everything is record-breaking. But driving the car and driving the engine now is just quite an emotional experience for me, because this is what I had in my head 4 years ago. And it delivers everything I hoped, plus. It really does. It's just so much better. The sound, the rev pickup, just everything. You know, the way it delivers the torque, it's just really is the ultimate.
Gordon, thank you so much for talking us through this amazing engine, and thank you for watching. But before we go, I've got a wee surprise in the next room. Should we go?
Let's go.
So Gordon, here's your surprise. 23 T.50 Cosworth V12s ready to go.
I know. It's, well, you think about it, we're looking at about, well, more than 15,000 horsepower here.
That's a lot of horse, and I'm not as good at maths as you are, but I can work out that if you're a T.50 owner, there is a 1 in 4 chance that your engine is
one
in
of
this
these
group.
is going in your car.
Yeah. It's just incredible. But this is really the last stage in this engine's journey here at Cosworth, before it goes and gets shipped.
It's been on the dyno, of course, and then comes here, yeah.
And this is it, into the shipping container, and off it goes to Dunsfold.
Next week we've got the first customer monocoque arriving.
We better get back to work then, come on.
We better.